The medical hall was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of alien machines and the steady breath of doctors cloaked in robes of dark blue, their tall frames moving with perfect precision, and graced the walls were smooth and glowing, faintly pulsing like a heartbeat of some living ship. Their patient lay still on the center table, a human barely conscious, his armor torn, his skin marked by burns, and cuts his breath shallow, but strong. The lead alien medic, named Talresh, moved forward slowly, his eyes glowing white, his long fingers holding a silver probe shaped like a feather dipped in frost. This one survived a direct energy blast, said a younger medic named Valen, his voice uncertain. The others looked at the human with quiet wonder. Never before had they examined one alive. Most had only seen humans in battle through screens or far away through scopes. Their stories were filled with fire and fury, tales of humans destroying ships 10 times their size, outnumbered, outgunned, yet always standing, always returning. Talresh nodded without speaking. He leaned in and carefully lifted the human's wrist, placing the probe gently against the skin. The machine lit up a soft green glow as it drew a small sample of blood, so dark it was almost black. It swirled within a glass like smoke trapped in water. Strange, murmured another doctor, looking over Talresh's shoulder. He pointed at the screen, where data began to scroll faster than any of them could follow. The genetic code was unlike anything in their database, not because it was foreign, but because it was changing, adapting, rewriting itself in real time. One strand folded into another, forming shapes and symbols none of their scanners could translate. Then the machine stopped. It beeped once, then twice, then let out a sharp high tone and shut off entirely. Talresh frowned and tapped the panel again. The screen flickered back, but this time the numbers were gone, replaced by a red circle pulsing with slow, steady rhythm like a heart. Valen took a step back and whispered, "The blood is reacting to the scan." Talresh looked at him, his expression unreadable. "It is not reacting," he said. "It is observing." Another doctor stepped forward. Her name was Lysra. She had studied over 100 species across the quadrant and never seen anything like this. She reached out to take the vial, but paused, her hand frozen in mid-air. The vial was warm, not from a machine, but from within. The blood was alive, not in the way cells live, not in the way bacteria multiply, but alive in thought and intention. She looked at Talresh and said, "This blood has memory." Before he could answer, the room lights dimmed, the walls shimmered like heat waves passing through glass. The air felt heavier, each breath harder. To take machines shut down one by one, power fading not in failure, but in surrender, as if they too were afraid. The human on the table stirred, his eyes still closed, his fingers twitching ever so slightly. Talresh stepped back and turned toward the other sealed lab. He said quietly, "No one enters, no one leaves." Valen moved to the wall and activated the lock's heavy door, slid into place, and energy fields buzzed to life surrounding the room of violet light. Lysra approached the human and leaned closer, voice soft. "Can you hear me?" she asked. His lips moved slowly, almost like a dream, his words barely above a whisper. "You should not have done that." The doctors froze, unsure what he meant. Talresh asked, "What is it? What is in your blood?" The human opened his eyes. They glowed faintly like the stars on a cold, clear night. He said, "I do not know. We never looked. We never needed to." His eyes closed again, but his pulse remained strong. The vial of blood now pulsed in sync with the lights overhead, and the energy field began to waver slightly as if touched by a storm from far away. Lysra checked the sensors and found nothing outside. No energy surges, no radiation, just silence. But the room itself felt different, like the laws of nature had bent slightly off-center. Valen tried to speak, but his voice caught his throat, his mind filled with images. He did not recognize old memories, not his own places. He had never seen wars that never happened, feelings that were not as the blood is speaking to me. He whispered. Talresh looked at him and saw his eyes change color, slightly, not fully, but enough to know something was wrong. Or maybe something was waking. The others gathered around, unsure what to do, unsure if they were still doctors or witnesses to something far older, far deeper than science. Lysra reached into her pocket and pulled out a containment cube. She placed a blood sample inside, then added 3 more layers of shielding before placing inside the vault beside the medical bench. "Do not tell the council." Yet Talresh said, "Not until we understand what we have found." Valen nodded, his hands shaking. The human slept once more, his body quiet, but his presence strong like a mountain, waiting to move. The blood still pulsed. The machine stayed silent, and the lab fell into stillness, filled with questions that none of them could yet answer. And outside, far above, the ship's stars blinked slowly one by one, as if something out there was watching too. Inside the sealed lab, the air had grown colder and heavier, like the breath of an unseen storm pressing against their skin. The doctors stood in a silent circle around the sleeping human, his chest rising and falling slow, And steady as blood, still glowing softly from inside the containment cube, Talresh, the chief medic, stared at the flickering energy fields on the monitors. They showed no threats, no movement outside, no breaches, but still his instincts screamed something was coming not from outside, but from deep within the blood itself. Lysra sat by the console, her fingers moving fast across the controls, trying to isolate the frequency the blood had emitted earlier. It was not just a signal. It was a pattern of code that moved like thought-like language, but no translator could read it. Valen stood at the far end of the lab, his hands shaking slightly, his head still filled with strange flashes of places he had never been. Each time he blinked, he saw fire and gold metal and shadows walking like giants across ruined worlds. He tried to clear his mind, but the visions only grew stronger. Talresh moved to the vault and checked the containment seals again, each layer held. But he could feel the pulse even through the walls of rhythm, not tied to any machine or life form. They had studied it, felt old, not just in age, but in purpose, as if the blood carried a message from something ancient buried deep within the human species, something no one had ever noticed before, because no one had ever looked this closely. The human stirred again, his fingers curling slightly, his eyes fluttered open. But this time, they did not glow. Instead, they held a deep calm, as if he had accepted something that others had yet to understand. He looked at Talresh and spoke, his voice low and slow. "You cannot hold it. You cannot stop it." Talresh stepped closer and asked, "Hold what? Stop what?" The human smiled faintly and said, "The echo, it always returns. It cannot be silenced." Before Talresh could ask more, the lights dimmed again. The monitors began to show strange spikes in the air particles, moving faster, as if time itself had shifted slightly. The blood in the vault pulsed once, then twice, then sent a ripple through the energy field, not a break, but a wave like something testing its cage. Lysra checked the readings and whispered, as learning every second it becomes more. Suddenly the walls trembled, not from impact, but from vibration, the kind that travels through bone and memory. The machines turned off one by one, not broken, just quiet, as if listening. Valen dropped his knees, clutching his head. Voices filled his mind, not loud, but deep like thunder in dreams. He saw a star swallowed by gold, a ship, rising from ashes, a planet, screaming. Without sound, he cried out, but the human spoke again, not to comfort, but to remind. It is not pain, it is memory, and memory cannot be erased. Talresh helped Valen stand, his face pale, his heart racing faster than normal. He looked at Lysra and said, "It spoke to me, not in words," and feeling like a storm with meaning. Talresh looked at the vault again, the cube still pulsed red, steady and slow. But now there was something else inside. The glow, tiny strands of gold, like veins threading through the fluid, weaving into shapes, symbols that shifted faster than the eye could follow. Lysra turned the screen to show the others. The gold lines formed a spiral, then a tree, then something like a face before it turned to chaos. "It is trying to speak," she said. Talresh nodded, but said nothing, his mind already racing. What if the blood was not just reacting to study? What if it was always waiting to be awakened? What if every battle, every human act of survival, had been part of something larger, something no one had guessed? The human tried to sit up, and Talresh helped him gently, placing a pillow behind his back. The man looked around, eyes landing on each doctor one at a time, his voice steady. "Now your kind always watch from above, never close enough to see the cost. Now you have seen the price and the gift." Talresh asked, "Is this in all humans?" The man looked up at the ceiling, his gaze distant. "It is in all who choose to stand when others run. It is in all who carry loss and still move forward. It is not in blood alone, but in will and memory and choice." The machines began to glow again, not from power, but from resonance. They hummed softly in tune with the blood, like instruments joining a forgotten song. Lysra backed away from the console, her face pale. "We should inform the High Council," she said, but Talresh shook his head. "Not yet. They will not understand. They will want to destroy it. And if we do, we may lose something we were never meant to forget." The human leaned forward, weak but firm. "You wanted to know what made us strong. Now you know. It was never muscle, never metal, never fire. It was what we carry inside. And you just touched the first spark." Talresh turned to Valen, who nodded, still trembling, and to Lysra, who stood frozen between awe and fear. Then he looked once more at the vault and knew nothing. The galaxy would be the same again. Far beyond the stars, above the research lab, in a dark chamber, the High Council, a message from Talresh, arrived in silence. The glowing walls shifted colors as the data played. The senior members of the council watched the footage of human. On the table, the glowing blood, the golden strands moving through the fluid, the machines going quiet, the room pulsing like a living thing. The elders did not speak, not yet, but their eyes reflected worry, curiosity, and something close to fear. The head elder stood from his seat, a tall figure with skin like black stone etched with light. He placed his hand on the glowing sphere, In the center of the room, the message replayed again, and again slower each time, the blood's golden strands now forming clearer shapes like memory patterns buried in ancient text-forgotten languages. Waking from sleep at last, he spoke his voice like wind over ice. This is not science, it is legacy. Elsewhere in the lab, Talresh stood beside the human, who had now risen from the table still weak, but walking his hand pressed gently to the vault that now held the sample. The glow had changed. It was no longer just red. It had taken on a golden hue, not bright, not burning, but warm like morning sun, rising over an old battlefield. The human looked at Talresh, his voice low. "And Comet remembers," he said, and Talresh asked what remembers. The human placed his hand over his heart, not his mind. It was never about what we think. It was about what we carry, what was given long ago by those who came before. He turned to Lysra, who stood nearby, watching him like a child watches fire, both drawn and cautious. He told her, "Your people look at us like puzzles, but you forgot we look back, we see you too, and some of us remember more than you expect." Outside the lab, the air had changed. The sky above the dome shimmered faintly, not in color, but in feeling. Birds did not fly near. Animals had gone silent. Even the wind seemed to avoid the area around the facility. Talresh looked out from the observation window and saw the shimmer in the distance, like a memory made of light shifting shapes that matched none of their records. He felt something stir in his chest, not fear, not pain, but recognition, like hearing a song from childhood played far away. Back inside, Valen sat quietly with his head in his hands, no longer trembling, but not speaking either, his mind still filled with flashes, images that did not belong to him. He had seen humans before in records and battlefields, but now he saw them different, walking through storms, holding wounded comrades, building homes from ruin, smiling in fire. They were not just survivors, they were carriers of something deeper, something old and unbroken. Lysra stepped into the vault chamber. Her hand hovered over the shield. She could feel the heat from the sample. Though no fire burned, it called to her not in sound, but in feeling. Her breath caught as she saw a new shape forming in the glowing fluid, a spiral surrounded by rings, and then a figure standing tall, arms open, as if to offer something. Her fingers shook, but she could not look away. Talresh entered and placed a hand on her shoulder, gently pulling her back. "It is speaking again," he said, or remembering the human, joined them silent, his eyes reflecting the gold light, his voice low. "It is not mine alone, it belongs to all of us. You just never looked deep enough to see, and now you have." Talresh nodded slowly, 1,000 questions in his mind, but none ready for voice. Far above them, the High Council had reached no decision. They argued in soft tones about danger, power, the unknown. But the head elder only watched the replay, his eyes locked on the pulse of the sample, the golden patterns, the way it moved like it had purpose. He knew this was not just about science. This was not about control. This was about history and truth, and maybe even destiny. Talresh sent a final message before cutting all outgoing transmissions. The sample must not be moved. The human must not be harmed. We are beyond data. Now we are standing at the edge of something we cannot name, but must understand the council did not answer, not yet. But their silence spoke volumes, and Talresh knew the storm had already begun. That night no one slept. The machine stayed quiet. The lights dimmed. The stars outside blinked slower, as if time itself was pausing. The human stood in the center of the lab, not with pride, not with anger, but with the weight of memory. His presence no longer felt foreign. He belonged now not just in the room, but in the story unfolding around them. Lysra approached him, her voice quiet. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked at the sky through the glass and said, "We wait and we learn, and when it comes we stand." The day broke with silence over the Talresh facility. The sky above the dome looked normal, but the sensors said otherwise. Radiation levels had shifted, magnetic fields danced in patterns unknown to alien science. Nothing felt dangerous, yet everything felt different, as if the world held its breath. The human stood near the vault, his eyes closed, not sleeping, not speaking, just standing like a statue of flesh and memory. The glow from the sample had softened, no longer pulsing, but breathing gently with golden waves flowing like liquid time. Lysra entered with a slow step, unsure she should speak, unsure she would understand what he might say. She asked him if he felt well. He opened his eyes and nodded, but there was no smile, only calm. His voice like wind through tall grass said, "It is quiet now. It listens, it waits." Lysra looked at the vault, then back at him. "What does it wait for?" she asked, and he answered, "It waits for choice, your choice, not mine." Talresh observed from the upper platform, his mind flooded with questions, his thoughts turning like broken gears in an ancient clock. He reviewed the scans again and again, watching the spiral, the figure, the golden threads that formed symbols none could translate. He called Valen, who had recovered enough to speak again, though he looked older somehow, as if he'd seen too many winters in one night. Valen confirmed that he still heard echoes, not voices, not Words but feelings, waves of emotion that were not his, but familiar like memories of dreams that never belonged to him. Outside, the council had sent a ship not to retrieve, but to observe. It hovered far from the facility, cloaked behind an asteroid, its crew forbidden to interact, only to watch and report. Still, the ship's sensors showed the same strange changes, light bending slightly, time flickering near the vault, temperature stable, yet readings broke logic. It was as if the laws of nature bent gently around the human and the blood he carried. In the deeper layers of the facility, Talresh found an ancient record room, long sealed, untouched by light for decades. He opened files written in languages no longer spoken. Holograms flickered with images of species long gone. Some looked human, some did not, but many shared symbols now seen in the golden fluid. He found one file marked forbidden. It showed a spiral of gold surrounding a dark sphere, and beside a warning not in words, but a symbol of danger and discovery side by side. He returned to the lab and showed it to Human, who looked at the image and placed his hand over the screen softly, as if it were a lost friend. "I think this was before us," he said, "or maybe part of us. Maybe they gave us something. Maybe we were made to carry it, not for war, not for power, but for memory." Talresh asked him, "Why now? Why did it wake?" Now the Human looked toward the vault and said, "Maybe because you asked, maybe because you saw." The glow from the sample shifted again, this time into motion shapes, forming, then fading like breath in cold air. One looked like a tree, another like stars, another like a face, or maybe a mass of machines tried to scan, but failed again. Their screens turned to static, then silence. Even the backup units lost signal. The vault itself began to hum, a low sound, felt more than heard, like music from beneath the skin. Lysra stepped forward and reached toward the shield. The Human caught her hand gently, his grip strong. "But kind, not yet." He said, "It is not ready. You must understand first. Not take, not own, understand." Talresh stepped closer, to his voice careful. "What does it want?" The Human looked around the room and said, "Maybe nothing, maybe everything, maybe it just wants to be remembered." The day passed without answers. The vault glowed. The Human stood near it. The aliens moved like shadows, whispering theories, recording data, but none could explain the feelings that spread through the base, memories that were not theirs, dreams that belonged to no one, and yet touched everyone. Even those who never entered the vault felt it, a shift, a pull like gravity from a forgotten star. The council ship sent one final message: "Do not open the vault, do not move." The Human prepared for containment, but Talresh deleted the message before the others could read it. He turned off the long-range comms, locked the access codes, and stood between the vault and the door. He told them, "This is not something to fear. This is something to respect, and if we are wise, maybe follow." Night fell again. Stars blinked above and below within, and without time bent softly around the sample. And the story continued to unfold, written not in ink, not in code, but in the blood of a species no one understood until now, and maybe never fully would. But still they listened, and they waited, and they hoped. The chamber grew quieter as the cycle continued its rotation above the facility. The stars moved slowly across the dome, but inside the silence felt louder than anywhere. The vault no longer pulsed with urgency. Instead, it gave off a steady hum like the heartbeat of something ancient. And awake Talresh stood near the edge of the observation deck, his fingers laced behind his back, eyes locked on the golden light that now shimmered like calm water. Lysra sat beside the Human, who still showed no sign of pain, only peace. The crew had stopped taking scans, not because they gave up, but because the machines refused to record anything new. The data loops collapsed, the codes unraveled, and every attempt to extract more information ended with failure or machine burnout. The last scanner melted from the inside. Without ever touching vault, the Human had told them not to try, but they did anyway, and now they sat with questions they could not answer and memories that felt borrowed. Talresh reviewed the ancient symbols again, and again one shape kept repeating, not in the vault, not in the blood, but in their own facility, carved in the oldest walls, hidden in forgotten corners behind panels no one had touched for generations. A swirl of gold surrounded by 6 stars, a symbol of life or power, or something deep in the archives, had no record of its meaning. And yet it was here long before the Humans arrived, long before they themselves understood what it meant. The Human finally moved for first time in hours. He stood and placed a hand on the vault, not to open it, not to test it, just to feel his voice soft. Said it remembers. Talresh stepped forward and asked, "What do you mean?" And the Human answered, "The blood carries more than life. It carries memory. It carries voice. It carries a reason." The vault glowed brighter in response, not with heat, but with presence, as if acknowledging its connection with the one who now touched it. Lysra asked if it was safe. The Human nodded and said, "It is never about safety. It is about truth, and truth is never quiet." The others gathered around, unsure whether to feel afraid or honored to witness something that might change their place in the galaxy. Valen stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes still haunted from the whispers he heard days before, yet He stayed knowing something inside him had already changed. The council ship sent another message coded urgent, demanding the facility surrender the human and the sample for relocation. And Isolation Talresh did not respond this time. He opened the message in private and deleted it again, then shut off the final relay lock in the base from outside influence. The crew looked at him with worry, but he raised a hand and said, "We are already in this. We must see it through." We asked, and now it answers. That night strange dreams came to all who slept, not a war, not a fear, but stars of long journeys across voids, untouched by ships of voices, speaking not in language, but in feeling. One crew member awoke in tears, unable to explain what he saw, only that it felt real, more real than any waking moment had ever been. Talresh recorded every testimony, and each pointed to the same image, the 6 stars and the golden spiral reaching outward. By morning, the vault began to change. The outer shell melted into itself, revealing a sphere of light floating above the pedestal of the golden fluid, with informed symbols one after another flashing for seconds before fading away. The human stepped closer, this time not alone, but with Lysra at his side, her hand in his, as if the vault no longer threatened, but welcomed. Talresh allowed it, though his heart beat fast, uncertain of what would come next. The sphere opened without warning, not with sound, but with a wave of warmth, the kind felt by a child in the arms of someone they trusted, expanded and formed a hollow space, within where light danced like memories. The human stepped forward and entered it, disappearing. In a blink, Lysra gasped, but did not move. Talresh reached out, but the sphere pulsed gently, as if to say, "Wait." Seconds passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt broken. Then the human returned, walking calmly, eyes brighter, skin healed, voice deeper, but still kind. He said, "I saw them, the ones before us. They were not gods. They were not masters. They were messengers. They gave a gift and buried it in us, waiting for us to grow, waiting for someone to remember, waiting for someone to care." The crew listened, not moving, not breathing as he spoke. He told them of a world beyond time, of memories shared across generations, stored in blood, waiting for one moment of truth, one act of peace, one spark of curiosity that would unlock it. And now it had begun. The vault faded into dust, leaving only the golden light, floating like a flame without air, and all stood in silence, knowing the galaxy had just changed forever. The golden light remained in the air like a silent star that never blinked and hovered above the place where the vault once stood, calm and still, but alive with power none of them understood. Yet they all felt it deep inside, like a warmth in the chest, like the echo of a voice they had never heard before. Talresh stood before it again, arms lowered, eyes wide, no fear left, only wonder. Beside him the human stood silent, as if listening to something no one else could hear. The air inside the chamber had changed. It was not thicker, not colder, just different, like breathing a new world, like being under a sky never seen before. Lysra kept her hand on the scanner. Even though the device no longer worked, it had burned out when the light first rose, but she touched it anyway, as if hoping for a sign. And as her fingers rested on the cold metal, she felt something like a pulse, not in her skin, but in her mind. The others gathered again. None spoke, not because they had no words, but because silence now carried more meaning. Every breath, every step, every glance toward the golden light felt sacred, felt heavy with truth. Valen leaned against a wall, trying to make sense of the visions. He kept seeing shapes, stars, paths, lines drawn across the sky he had never flown in, and yet he felt like he knew where they led. Then something new happened. The light above the pedestal began to shift. It twisted gently, then split into smaller lights, 6 in total. Each one floated to a different part of the room, resting above the heads of 6 crew members, including Talresh and Lysra. The lights did not burn, did not shine harshly. They glowed softly, like trust, like old memories. Waking up, one crew member cried, without knowing why. Another smiled and whispered thank you, though no one understood who he was thanking. The human spoke again, his voice steady and low. He said, "It chose us not because we are powerful, but because we listened, because we cared, because we were willing to learn." Talresh asked what it wants from us. The human answered, "It wants nothing, only to be remembered, only to be shared, only to be known." A soft tone rang through the chamber like a bell from forgotten place, and then the lights moved again, drifting out of the room slowly through the air, passing walls. As if they were not solid, the crew followed, but not with haste, with respect. They walked through the corridors of the station, watching the lights float ahead, until they reached the highest deck, where the stars outside seemed closer than ever. One by one, the lights rose into the sky, joining the stars like they belonged there from the beginning. And when the last one disappeared, a wave of warmth spread across the station. All the lights flickered once, then returned brighter. The walls seemed cleaner, smoother, as if time itself had been pulled away from them and left something pure behind. The council sent more messages this time, with threats, demands, warnings. Talresh read them all, but answered none. He sent a single image, instead the golden light hovering the chamber, and then cut off the line again. The crew knew what it meant. They would not surrender to human. They would not surrender the truth. They would not give up what they now carried inside. For days, no one left the station. They studied the space, the walls, the machines. Everything felt different, not in form, but in feeling, as if the station had become part of a greater design, as if the stars above were no longer just fire and gas, but paths, mapped stories, waiting to be understood. The crew did not fear the silence. They embraced it. They worked without orders. They cleaned without instruction. They watched without speaking, and still they felt closer than they ever had before. The human spent most of his time in the chamber where the vault had once stood, sometimes walking in slow circles, sometimes simply sitting with his eyes closed, as if speaking to something no one could see. Talresh once asked him if he missed Earth, and the human said, "Earth is not a place, as a memory, and I carry it with me now and always." Lysra began recording new data by hand, drawing symbols. The machines no longer recognized shapes that came to her in dreams, and when she compared them to the ones carved in the oldest parts of the ship, she found they matched perfectly, as if the past had come forward through her hands. Then on the seventh day, the human stood at the highest point of the station and pointed to a star that had begun to flicker with golden light. He said, "It begins there," and the crew watched as a new pattern formed in the sky, a shape drawn from starlight, a message written not in language, but in design, and though none of them could explain it, they all understood its meaning. Something was coming, not a threat, not an enemy, but a choice, and they had already made it. The golden light in the sky grew stronger each day, not brighter, not hotter, but stronger, like a song, slowly building like a wave that has not yet reached the shore. Talresh stood near the window every morning, watching the light change shape. Sometimes it moved like fire, sometimes like wind, sometimes it held still like a statue in the stars. He did not know what it meant, but he knew it was not random. It was waiting for something. The crew had stopped checking the old systems long ago. They no longer needed them. The station worked on its own, not with wires, not with fuel, but with something else, something invisible, but alive. The walls no longer groaned, the engines no longer failed, the lights never flickered. Everything had become smooth, quiet, aware. Lysra spent her days drawing more patterns on the walls and floors, symbols she did not learn from books, but from dreams they flowed from her hand, as if they had always lived there, hidden, waiting. The human, who had once been a wounded stranger, was now the center of their small world. He spoke less now, but when he did, they all listened, even when the words confused them, even when the meanings slipped through their minds like smoke. They still listened, because every time he spoke, the golden light seemed to respond, a slight shimmer, a deeper tone, a faint echo in the room. One evening, the stars outside began to move, not in the way stars usually shift slowly with time and distance, but with purpose. 6 stars curved inward, forming a circle around the golden one. Then they pulsed once, twice, then held still. The crew gathered, without being called, drawn by the feeling in their chests, a pull that felt like memory mixed with music. They watched in silence as the golden light opened like a flower, unfolding petal by petal, each beam revealing something new. A figure stepped in the center of the light, not human, not alien, tall, and made of shifting colors like glass filled with storms that had no face. But it felt like it was looking at them all. Its voice was not a sound, but a thought placed gently in each mind. "Thank you for listening," it said. "Thank you for remembering." The crew stood still. Even the machines went silent. The figure moved slowly to the human, touched his shoulder with one glowing hand, and said, "Your kind is the key, because you forgot and then chose to remember." Talresh asked, "What happens now?" And the figure replied, "Now you carry the memory, not just in words, not just in thought, but in being. You have opened a path that was closed. You have made still water move again. The stars will answer, and so will others, but you must remain true." Then the figure turned to Lysra and said, "Draw the gate so it may open again." And she did. Her hand moved faster than before, her eyes glowing faint blue as the symbols poured onto the floor walls and ceiling, forming a circle of light around them. All the golden light responded, rising, twisting, dancing around the new gate like wind around fire. The figure began to fade, its voice soft but strong. "We will return. When you are ready, we will wait. Where time does not follow, we will remember. Because you remember." The golden light folded into itself, becoming a single beam that shot into the sky, joining the stars. The gate on the floor pulsed once, then dimmed, but the marks remained glowing softly like coals under ash. For a long time no one spoke. The air was thick, not with fear, but with meaning. Something old had ended and something new had begun. Valen stepped forward and said, "We cannot go back." And Talresh nodded. "We are not the same people who found the vault." And the human smiled, not with pride, but with peace. The station now floated between worlds, no longer tied to one place, no longer part one story. It had become something else, a beacon, a bridge of memory. Made solid the crew still worked, but not out of duty, out of purpose. Each day brought new visions, new patterns, new visitors, not ships, not creatures, but lights, dreams, ideas that entered the minds of those who listened. Lysra kept drawing her walls filled with maps of stars. They had never seen paths between thoughts, not places. Talra sent messages to no one, only to the stars, each one a piece of what they had learned, what they had become to humans, sometimes vanished for hours or days, walking through halls that seemed to shift from alone. When asked where he went, he simply said, deeper. They knew others would come one day, not to fight, not to steal, but to learn. And when they came, the crew would be ready, not with weapons, not with walls, but with welcome, because they now knew the truth of blood had been a key, not to power, but to memory, not to war, but to wisdom. The gold had never been metal. It had always been light, the kind that lives inside, waiting to shine when someone finally looks. The stars above whispered now, not loudly, not with words, but with presence, and the station listened, its lights warm and steady, its rooms filled with peace, its crew forever changed by one truth, remembered by one life, saved by one step into the unknown.